Alright. This is this is a Lovell again, prior enlisted Marine, military history buff, overall just somebody who does a lot of research. And just as I promised in the last video, I'm going to do a calls bull video. And this one's going to be a Lovell calls bull on feel-good measures. I hate feel-good measures. I absolutely cannot stand them. They are the dumbest thing in the world. Let's cite one prime example of feel-good measure that we call minimum wage. It feels good to raise the minimum wage by the politicians. They're like, oh, yeah, we did something to help the people who are impoverished. Except for one thing. It made the inflation even worse, dude. Because now everybody has to pay this amount to have employees. It means that there are less jobs available because, let's put it to you this way. Say minimum wage was $15 an hour versus where here in Virginia it has been as low as $7.25 that I've actually worked with. Well, let's put it to you this way. That is more than double what was actually done before. And it felt good to give me $15 an hour at first. But at the same time, I have to work twice as hard because the place I work for can only hire half as many people. And that's if they want to keep the prices the same. The other aspect that doesn't feel so good is now they've got some companies do not have a choice. They've got to raise the prices. And some of them do all of these things and more. They don't hire as many people. They have to work the ones that are there longer in order to make at exactly 40 hours and no overtime for anybody, because overtime becomes truly a monster, because overtime at $7.25 an hour is, let's see, that'd be 350 plus 12. Okay, that'd be 362 plus 325. That would put it at $10 and roughly 90 cents an hour at that point. Whereas overtime at $15 an hour, well, that's $7.50 plus 15. That put it at $22.50 an hour. Yeah, that's quite a bit more. So they're not going to let you have any overtime. So even if you need a little bit of overtime to make up say you've got a big car repair bill and you know it's coming, like you got to put a new catalytic converter in your vehicle, and those things cost $1,000, more than $1,000 a pop. Well, now you're $15 an hour minimum wage. Now you can't work the overtime to make that extra money, so that way you can actually afford the catalytic converter. Now you have to go a few extra weeks before you can go ahead and put that in. It's part of, and it's actually, in some states, you have to reinstall the catalytic converter just to be able to pass inspection. You can't even go to work without it. And yeah, you'd have to work a lot of overtime in order to make that $1,000. But at the same time, here's another part where it would make a difference. The price of that catalytic converter wouldn't be so high, because guess what? Companies wouldn't have to pay so much to their employees. So as a result, the catalytic converter might be about $700 or less. Wow. What a difference. Probably because $15 minimum wage is half the price. And oh, by the way, labor is half of your cost in almost any business. So it would basically comprise of roughly a quarter of what comes of the price. It would make it about $750 for that catalytic converter, so less expensive. But that doesn't even count what it would cost to mine the platinum that goes into the catalytic converters, or the steel that goes around the casing of the catalytic converter, or the machine time that it takes to actually make this into a viable part, or the time that it took to install the part in the factory in the first place. We're talking about massive cost decreases all over the board if that minimum wage had not been touched. So that's one feel good measure right there. And all it does is raising the minimum wage, all it does is just make things worse. During 2020, when the lockdowns were happening and they were requiring people to wear masks, another worthless endeavor. Anybody who has received training from an NBC specialist like I have, hello, will tell you that eyes are more vulnerable than lungs in an airborne NBC environment. Nuclear, biological, chemical. In this case, biological. Your eyes are more vulnerable, so what you would have to do is wearing sealed eye protection, and you would also have to wash your hands before you take your eye protection off, and then wash your hands again before you touch your eyes. So if your eyes itch, you might as well just learn to ignore that. Eyes more vulnerable than lungs, and at the same time, the masks themselves are about as useful as a wet cigar. Absolutely worthless. Because the holes in all of these masks, for the exception of the N95, is too big to stop incoming viral particulate. Any viral particulate. So, worthless. Worse than worthless. In most cases, because they actually give you this feeling of a false sense of security. If somebody at the Pizza Hut I worked at had gotten COVID, technically speaking, anybody who'd been in the building for more than 5 minutes would have already been exposed anyway. It would have gotten on their hands, it's already on the surfaces and the counters and everything. It was no good at all. So somebody could just be handling money. And because they were only wearing a mask. And then they touch their eyes. Next thing you know, I've got an employee that's out of action because they got it. That might have been exactly how I got it myself. I'll never know. Because it hit me out of nowhere. I was fine one day and not fine the next. I'll never know what that exposure point was. For all I know, it came from where somebody else in the house had gotten a Food Lion and gotten some groceries. Now, that doesn't explain why this particular feel-good measure it is more harmful than it's good. Well, putting these masks on have caused more depression, more substance abuse, and therefore more suicide and more overdose. They've stunted the growth of the children that are in schools now, especially young children. They need to see the facial expressions as a key part of their development. So, and even if you give the optimal amount of life-saving measures that these masks and lockdowns and everything have done, you're talking about maybe in the tens of thousands, where hundreds of thousands of people have died by the suicide and overdose because of the lockdowns that come from the substance abuse and the depression. Not worth it. It'd be the equivalent of, say I said, hey, give me $100. I'll give you back 10. You'd never take the deal. Dumb. Gun control was another example of feel-good measures. It was like more gun control laws I just laid out in the last video. Absolutely no good at all. And I've even laid out where a smart enough person will find a way around it. And there's hundreds of ways around it. Heck, it's like, in fact, it would actually be considered probably more dangerous if somebody was to, say, use a knife and to make it a mass stabbing. Because they don't have weapons in the schools anyway. No guns, no knives, none of that. And at the same time, if you catch these people off guard, you can take the teacher out, and you can still lock the door and actually keep the kids from getting out. And it's actually quieter. They'll only hear the screaming of the children, and some of the teachers would probably presume it's something innocuous. So, gun-free zones, worse than worthless. Again. But if the teacher had a gun and the guy came in with a knife or a gun, well, armed teacher, bang. Or if armed security guard, well, armed security guard could definitely take the person down, whether it be a bang or simply go drop the weapon now before they even get in the school, and be able to detain them long enough for law enforcement to show up and put some nice silver bracelets on these guys. But no, they want to ban the weapon. They want to add more gun-free zones. They want to make the whole country a gun-free zone, which is going to be absolutely freaking worthless. It is worse than worthless. It will actually cause the problem to get worse, because the people who are wanting to commit crimes are not going to listen to the laws. Criminals are outlaws. Outlaws don't follow the law. And if I break it down any further, I'm going to stop breaking it down Barney style and break it down Teletubby style, okay? Worse than worthless. Makes the problem worse. Some of the places that have the hardest gun control laws are also, coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, some of the places that are the most violent. And if you actually look at the causes of the violence, prosperity is more of a cure. Respect is more of a cure. I covered a little bit more of that in the last video. Prosperity is another part of it. Is not only if you look at the cities in the country that have the highest poverty rates, they also have the highest violent crime rates, because people are desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. And that includes committing armed robbery because they just want to be able to get through. And at the same time, fighting the drug war is also a prime solution for this. Over 90% of all crime in the country, this is by the Uniform Crime Report released by the FBI every year, is committed by people who are high on drugs or are attempting to feed a drug habit. All of them. 90% of all. So, stop the fentanyl from coming in, and you stop most of the crime. And that goes back to a little something that I'm going to cite Prager U on this one, where he cites one of the differences between a conservative and a liberal is conservatives and liberals look at problems a slightly different way. The liberals look at what feels good. Conservative looks at what does good. And it might not do good immediately, but it would do good. Case in point, the Aikido, I pointed out, it would take at least 13 years to have a graduating high school senior have the ability to have completed all of the Aikido training. Granted, they might be competent well before that point. So it's a generational solution. It is basically planting a tree that I know I will never sit under the shade of. But that's 3 prime examples of where feel-good measures are not only worthless, but they're worse than worthless. I've been Lovell. You guys have been awesome. I'm going to be trying to get back to my videos on a daily or at least 3 times daily basis. And I hope you guys are having a good day.